Welcome to the Inventor's Edge podcast, where insight meets innovation. Whether you're sketching your first idea or refining a finished product, you're in the right place. Our mission is to equip you with the tools, expertise, and clarity you need to succeed as an inventor, while helping you conquer fears and limiting beliefs that may be holding you back. I'm your host, Scott Putnam, founder and CEO of Inventor's Edge. Before becoming a seasoned product development coach, I was a wide-eyed inventor with a head full of ideas but no clear path forward. I know firsthand what it's like to feel stuck, uncertain, and overwhelmed. Fast forward to today, I'm a successful entrepreneur with multiple licensing deals and products on the market. I'm committed to helping inventors like you overcome obstacles, conquer fears, and transform your ideas into tangible success through proven, actionable, step-by-step strategies that deliver real results. Join us as we bring in industry pros, share expert advice, and dive deep into the world of innovation. Ready to turn your ideas into reality? Let's get started. As an inventor, have you ever wondered how design affects behavior, or how design, innovation, and branding relate? Or wonder about emerging trends in design? If so, you are in the right place, my friend. Today's episode is a special one. We're joined by Dr. Dan Formosa, internationally recognized design expert, co-founder of the Masters in Branding program at SVA, and a pioneer in inclusive and human-centered design. Dan worked with global companies like Ford Motor Company and has his design featured in the Museum of Modern Art. He's also the host of Well Equipped on YouTube, where he critiques kitchen gadgets with both humor and expertise. In this episode, Dan shares his philosophy on how design influences behavior, why inclusive thinking leads to better innovation, and how branding connects directly to product success. There is so much to unpack in this episode. Be sure to stay until the end. That's where he really gets into details about incredibly practical techniques for inventors, including how to prototype smarter and how to create informal but highly effective methods for gaining honest and useful feedback from individuals and focus groups both. Whether you're just starting out or deep in development, you're going to love this episode and walk away inspired and equipped to move your product forward. Let's dive in. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I was really curious about what got you into, or what was your journey into this amazing line of work?
Well, early on, if we're talking about going into the field of design, when I was in high school, I was heavily into art and heavily into engineering, which seemed to be a bit of a contrast. And, coming out of high school, I'm thinking, which way to go? Art school, engineering school? And I had someone, actually an art teacher, suggest the world of design, which I knew nothing about. But he thought it would be a good combination of those two skills, understanding technical aspects of things, of anything, engineering and art. So I started looking into design schools, industrial design schools, and ended up at Syracuse University, who has a 5-year program in industrial design. And we went from there.
Awesome. That's great. So after going through the Syracuse University, it just swept you right into that. That's what you've been doing since then, it sounds like.
Yeah, when I was in college, in design school, I was very focused, probably more so than others, I think, on understanding the person, the interaction that the person has to the product. So there was a lot of called worshiping of the thing. A lot of people wanted to make beautiful pieces of art that would be some sort of utilitarian product. But I would also make sure that if I was drawing a product, I would put a hand in the sketch. And I would think, well, how does someone hold that or touch it, or how does someone use that? So I was, even in high school, I was very much into user interaction, or usability and physical interaction with products.
Yeah. So
that sounds obvious now and something that you should do, but it wasn't as common as you would think back then.
I'd imagine you probably had a parent that never said, okay, Dan, you can look at it, but don't touch it. Like, Dad, pick it up.
I did a lot of touching of things.
It's a great way to learn, as kids, especially babies and toddlers. Like that's how you learn about things, right? You pick them up and touch them and get more information through your hands, right, than just your eyes or ears could.
Yeah, I'll tell you, one of my earliest memories of thinking about design at all was as a young kid driving Lincoln into the Lincoln Tunnel into New York City with my parents, and there was a billboard showing a BMW Isetta. Now, I don't know if you know what an Isetta is, but it is a tiny, tiny, tiny car with the door in the front. And the
Oh,
door opens in the front. And when it opens, the steering wheel goes with it. It's a very bizarre car. You can still see a couple of them in collections now in the US. But I'm thinking, how bizarre is that? What, what planet did that thing come from? And I was probably 6 years old. I was really early on.
wow.
But yeah, always curious about things.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that curiosity is such a big piece for inventors that are looking to design better products and become better inventors. I think that curiosity piece is kind of hardwired in there. And I think it's what helps people create better products, having that unsatiable curiosity about things.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I do at the School of Visual Arts, where it's a program on branding, but my course is about design and research. And I spend a lot of time convincing the class that they should get good at asking questions. And I've got to say, in general, no one is good at it. Everyone wants to come up with the answer. No one wants to come up with the question. So, a theme throughout the entire semester is get good at asking questions and ask the right questions and don't jump to answers or conclusions. Spend a lot of time asking questions and learning before you even start designing or creating anything.
That's great advice. I think we're sort of trained. I don't know if it's classical conditioning or going through school. The teachers ask the questions and then the students give the answers. But I love that approach of spend some time. And for some people, it might be a little bit uncomfortable, but just stay with that, coming up with the good questions to ask. Don't just immediately try to jump to an answer so you can check the box and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, as an assignment within that class, now these are grad students. They're old. They are adults,
Yeah,
and they've been through all that school and college. And every time they've been giving an assignment, they needed to come up with an answer. Like, ta-da! Here's my answer. And I gave an assignment very early on when I just started teaching this course. And the assignment was to come back with questions. You're going to do research, come back with questions. And I got to tell you, no one did it. No one could do it because we are so pre-programmed to, especially in a school environment, to come up with questions. I'm sorry, to come up with answers. That I was from the moon when I said we need questions, and they just literally, to my surprise, none of them. They were really good students. They could not. They did not do it. They could not do it because they're pre-programmed.
yeah. Yeah, it makes me think of I was in a grocery store when there was an earthquake in the Seattle area, and nobody used the emergency exit. Nobody.
Yeah, because the bell's gonna ring.
You can't use it. It's like people didn't recognize, wait a minute, this is an emergency. They just know if I push that, the alarm's going to go off.
That's funny.
It may be similar brain wiring with, wait a minute, no, we're supposed to come up with the answers, not the
Yeah,
questions.
and I got to say, it's funny in a funny way, in an odd way. I don't want to say it's funny that they're not running out the exit door.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, in addition to your background in design and research and co founding the Masters in Branding program at the School of Visual Arts in New York, how do design and innovation and branding relate? Because you have design, you have innovation, and then the branding.
A lot of even design groups, even designers, if they're being asked to design a product for a company, they don't hark back to the brand values. What does the company stand for? So if you're establishing a company or if you want to reposition a company, it's really important that that company stand for something. So what's happening lately, and this has been going on for a while, it's not about what you do. It's also about what you stand for. So if you think of companies that you admire, they probably stand for something even beyond that specific product that you are, that you bought or service that you purchased from them. Even if it's an audio product, you want to be sure that they understand audio, that they are gurus about audio. They know audio inside and they know everything they need to know about sound and sound quality. Or it could be something that has to do with sustainability or health. But you want to make sure, I mean, if you really want to build a brand, you really need to stand for something.
A lot of the inventors that we've worked with, especially with the licensing model, you come up with the widget and you make it the best you can, and then you present it to the company, and then they kind of decide, does this fit with our branding or not? So to start with the end in mind and really design it with brands in mind, it seems like it's almost like going back to starting with the question in mind. How do I design this to fit some of these brands more specifically?
Yeah, and that's exactly the approach you need to take. How does this puzzle piece fit into the bigger picture of what this company is doing or where this product can even take that brand?
It's really a different approach, because I think a lot of us get hung up on it just needs to work, right? That proof of concept. I got to make sure these special scissors cut the way I want, not thinking about what about the handle? What about the ergonomics and the coloring and the texture and all those other nuances that go into it that can help somebody down the road.
Yeah, and how does it communicate visually? How will it be exposed to people? What does it look like or what can you demonstrate in the Amazon photo or the internet photo or the video?
Mm-hmm.
You really need to think very holistically, and it really helps to think holistically.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the packaging too. I mean, that's something that really communicates a lot about the product before somebody even takes it out of the package. I think Apple's kind of mastered packaging to the point where people don't even want to throw it away. It's like it's a form of art.
Yeah. Funny, I've got an Apple box around here somewhere. Yeah, they're really nicely made. You think, what else can I do with this box? Actually, I have one right here in my desk. What else can I do with this box? It's beautiful. And I have a
Yeah,
few things in it. Yeah, paper clips in it.
exactly.
But yeah, where that also comes into play, like for instance, pharmaceuticals can be really intimidating. If you're on a medication, you pick up your pharmaceutical package, you're scared from minute one, right? Especially if it's a new medication, they can look very intimidating and not friendly and not very personable. So that is maybe an extreme area where you really want to warm up to the person early on, because you actually want to ease them into the fact that they are now starting this medication regimen that they may be on for the rest of their lives. And what you don't want to do is alienate them. So you really have to think start to finish. Some companies do it great. Some companies do packaging. No, I shouldn't say packaging. I should say the whole out of box experience.
Right.
When you design a product, you probably have about 15 or 20 minutes to impress someone before they return it to Amazon or Walmart.
Mm,
So Amazon or Walmart will take things back, no questions asked.
right.
And when you bring something back to Amazon or Walmart, they don't pay for that. The company who supplied it takes it back.
Right.
So it is super important on many different levels, not just building brand, but also the cost of a return is crazy expensive.
Yeah, it is. And I think thinking about the user experience from start to finish is such a big part of inventing it the right way. Best practices for inventing and product development and product design is just thinking all the way through the life cycle of the product. It's interesting that people start making those decisions in that 20-minute window. I didn't know that.
Well, tolerance or attention span is, and you also want to return something before you use it too much to make sure you can get it back in the box. So, yeah, you don't have a whole lot of time to impress someone before they decide that this needs to go back.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we talk about with creating sell sheets for products, and when you send that a one-page flyer to a company, they start making decisions immediately, and they'll have about 15 or 20 seconds looking at it, and they're making decisions very very quickly. So it's
Yeah. I've worked with a company who made a very big company out of Japan who makes blood pressure monitors. For instance, a lot of different medical devices. But with their blood pressure monitors, one, they're very difficult for people to use, especially applying the cuff. People just get it totally wrong. It's not in the right place. They don't follow the instructions. To that end, the instructions are not that good. The cuff's not that well designed. They're kind of confusing, and it's probably something you don't really want to do anyway. But when that happens, they may put the cuff on wrong, or, blood pressure changes anyway on a day-to-day basis. Hour to hour, your blood pressure can change. So when someone takes their blood pressure and they say, oh, it doesn't read the same thing that my blood pressure showed last week at my doctor's office, it must be inaccurate. So about 20% of their products get returned. 1 out of 5 products get returned. And these are sizable, significant blood pressure products, blood pressure monitor products. And when they get returned, they can't get reused or recycled. They get destroyed. So 20% of their products get crushed.
And they paid for the product, they're paying for the shipping to ship it back and all that. So yeah, it is really expensive for companies. So I can see the value in medical, whether it's a blood pressure cuff or prescription drugs or something. I just wonder how many companies are really keying into that user experience and making it somewhat attractive for people to want to open it, to want to use it, and to know how to use it. Are you seeing trends in that category, or is that just something that most of them dismiss?
Yeah, but I also see culture clashes between the usability aspect, the whole usability issue of drugs or medications, and the culture in the rest of the company. So it's a little hard to explain, but I also see a bit of a mismatch
Mhm.
in that not everyone has absorbed the fact that we really need to think about compliance from the patient's point of view.
Mhm.
Not here's your medication, take it.
Right.
But medication, the biggest improvement you can make in medications is not necessarily a new medication. It's figuring out how to get people to take the medications they already should be taking. So the
Right.
dropout rate is huge. And that's not good for the pharmaceutical company because so many people drop out. Compliance is, dropout is like 20, 30, 40% in some categories. So understanding how to keep people retained on that regimen is huge. And so what you don't want to do is alienate them. But
Right.
pharmaceuticals, since it's not the only issue, it's also exercise equipment. It's a lot of sustainability, a lot of topics where you really want to understand the person's point of view and their behavior and their resistance.
Right. Yeah.
And design could help a lot. Design can help a lot. Design and behavior as a topic is, it's not a new topic, but it's still in its infancy.
And what are you finding are some emerging trends, in the field of design or in innovation at the moment?
Well, I do think it's design and behavior is a huge topic. And like I said, it's pharmaceuticals, health, medicine, exercise. Lots of categories can benefit from understanding behavior.
Yeah.
Design and gender is a big issue, not that well understood, at least not that well practiced. Because I don't want to go too binary, but if I talk about just males and females, they have evolved quite differently and they are wired quite differently.
Mm.
And you can't just design a piece of sports equipment for a male and change the color to sell it to females. You really have to think differently about how are females built and what do they think and what are their values as opposed to male values.
Yeah, I think a lot of people just think of the physical differences, but taking into consideration the emotional, mental value systems in the approach to product design is really interesting.
Yeah, one thing we notice is that males and females shop quite differently. Maybe that's not news, but they shop quite differently.
Yeah.
And a female will generally think of a wider audience, where males will shop thinking for themselves. For instance, if they're buying a TV set, it's me, big screen TV,
Mhm.
sports games, football game. Whereas
Yeah.
females will think, oh, TV, we can have people over, the family will come over, my parents will come over, the kids need to watch it, etc. It's more of it's a much wider audience that females consider than males. I'm generalizing, but
Hmm.
it's pretty much the trends that we see. Males and females think and shop quite differently.
Yeah, I can see that. I think of the male brain as go get buffalo, bring it back to cave, right? Where it's the hunter gatherer differences that they just seem to be obviously hardwired into us, but affect everything, including how we approach products.
Yeah, I do this. I give a lot of talks and lectures, and one of the things I do is, and anyone can do, go to Google Images and type in males shopping
Mhm.
and see what those images are, and then type in female shopping and see what those images are. And what you notice right away is the females are shopping in a group. There
Oh,
are like 3 or 4 or 5 women walking down the aisle of a mall, and males are alone. Males are hunting, women are gathering. But it reflects instantly if you do a Google image search.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. I never thought about that. I Yeah, as guys, I guess we don't say, "Hey, let's get together and then go shopping." I don't think I've ever said that. Whereas,
Yeah. Yeah. I know, right? Yeah. Hey, guys, let's go to the mall, buy some socks. Yeah. But the other thing to note is that, well, females, they have, like I said, they have a wider vision of where these products are being used. They are also much more into benefits of products than features of products.
hmm,
So it's not just what does it does, it's more like what will it do for what's the actual effect. So males may be a lot more interested in the features, the theoretical capabilities of a product,
hmm,
and females would be more into the so what? Do I need that? Why do I need it? If I need it, that's great. But less, they're on a much higher level, actually, when you think about it. They are at a much more intellectual level of what they really want to get out of a product or a service.
yeah, and probably, I mean, I'm talking in generalities, but considering all of the other people involved and not just the user, not just them.
Hmm.
I think I don't know if it's just me or if it's other men, but I'm thinking, how is this product going to help me? Not how is this going to help the entire village? Which I guess
Exactly.
puts her down.
Yeah. Whereas women would rather invite the whole village over, have a little social gathering.
Right? Yeah.
And this is very generalized. This is very generalized. I don't mean to be so black and white in terms of males and females, but if you think about trends, and if also you think, we're into 50,000 years of evolution, being hardwired in evolution, and so we're pre-wired. We are predisposed to do things, and we've evolved accordingly. And that's how we've survived. And you can look at other animal species, and males and females also take on different roles, and they're just as important as each other, but they do complement each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
That's
have to say that because when you start talking about males and females, suddenly it sounds like, or there's a preconception that, oh, we're putting down females, like, they're not as features, they're not as, concerned, or they're not as sharp to think about it. But no, I think females are on a much higher level.
yeah. I could definitely see that in my own household.
Exactly. Yeah, I can go down to the kitchen and see that happening. Yeah.
When we think of design affecting behavior, what are some other examples of that? Just kind of in general.
Give this exercise, and this is based on an old George Nelson. Designer George Nelson. He's a
Yeah.
well-known furniture designer. He has some very well-known pieces in furniture design.
Yeah.
But he used to give a lecture about things that say no. And I have revived that, and I give that as an assignment to either in workshops on design or in the class that I teach on branding. If you walk around the street and you just look at all the things that non-verbally tell you to do something, usually tell you to say, usually telling you not to do something, they're
Mm,
everywhere. I mean, obvious one is barbed wire, right? If you walk around the city, New York City, you see barbed wire. Once you start noticing it, there's barbed wire in a lot of places.
mhm,
But you also see like fences that have little spikes on them
mm.
that are telling you not to sit there. You'll see park benches that will be designed so that you can't sleep on them. They'll have armrests too
Oh,
close
sure.
to each other so that you can't lie across. You'll see little protrusions coming out of sidewalks or ramps so you can't skateboard on them. You'll, of course, see cones. You'll see things that actually say no. There are so many things out there that non-verbally tell you not to do something. And once you start noticing, it's hard not to notice them. And then you realize, well, maybe why this city is so alienating a bit. I have all these nonverbal signals telling me no. So that's an example of design and behavior that
Yeah.
has been well practiced for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah. That's interesting. There's the verbal one. There's the stop sign or yield or do not walk or, do not enter, that kind of thing. But then I think of things like turnstiles in the subway designed for one person to get through. And it's very much a visual block, you
Yeah.
know, and
or the police tape. You see a lot of that around New York City. Crime scene. All called, they have words on them, but you don't really have to read them. You kind of just know that yellow band means don't go in there.
Right.
Crime scene.
Yellow with some black stripes or whatever. Like that's very visually like do not I think of like bees or wasps, things that can sting you. It's like that some of that tape visually reminds me a little bit of that.
Yeah. And that's the do not stuff. The other things, and something that, boy, this thought goes back to when I was in college. Someone pointed this out that in a shopping mall, if you want someone to slow down when they're walking down the shopping mall aisle, put stripes in the rug that are horizontal, because it sort of triggers something in your peripheral vision that maybe you're going to trip or something. So if the rug has horizontal stripes,
Mm-hmm.
you'll walk a little slower, or people in general will walk a little slower. So I always thought that was a pretty interesting example of how these visual cues are affecting the way we behave. Now, if
Yeah.
you go into a place like IKEA, they've got arrows that tell you, walk here, walk there. It's like, but somehow people work with it at IKEA because you're now in like a shopping theme park.
Mm.
You're going through the IKEA adventure of seeing everything that they make, and it is set up a bit like a theme park. So that's another way that seems strange that you would actually design a store that would force people into specific patterns. But, IKEA has been pretty successful. One of the things I did for Ford, and you mentioned that before, is to give a reward, a visual reward to drivers who drive efficiently. And this goes back years ago to their hybrid team was designing an interface for the first time. They were using an LCD interface, a computer interface in their instrument cluster. And so my recommendation to them was, why don't you feed back to the driver, not just about the car's performance, but also the driver's performance? Because one of the ways to save fuel is to drive efficiently, change your driving behavior so that you're not accelerating or braking too fast, etc. So that, you're not accelerating uphill, for instance. So took on the idea of let's report back to the driver what the driver's performance is, not just the car's performance, which is going to go on for like 100 years, but, how's the driver doing in terms of their performance? And that's been working. People have been behaving. Now they're hybrid drivers. They want to save fuel, which is why they bought a hybrid. But giving that feedback in a meaningful way can change driving behavior. And it's probably saved a gazillion gallons of gas to this point. It's been out for like more than 10 years in their hybrid vehicles. So that's been rather successful.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was in traffic where we are. I'm sure it's different in New York City, or maybe it's not, but it seems like people really accelerate a lot, even though there's a red light and they know they're going to have to hit the brakes pretty hard instead of
Mm-hmm.
giving it a little gas and just easing into the stop, which I try to do, not so much to save gas, although it's a good idea, but more just not to be so stressed. Just try to kind of relax a little bit. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and got to tell you, it's so funny for I've had a electric car in addition to a gas car, so we got two cars. And the electric car, I'm a little more flexible about accelerating fast because I don't feel there's a whole lot of exhaust coming out the back of the car. So I
right.
will say I'm a little more into accelerating on the electric car than I am. Of course, it's spending electricity and doing that. Um,
Right.
but I'm just a little more okay with it. A little more, not a lot. I'm a little more okay with accelerating.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if other people sort of feel the same way, like, oh, I can give it a little more gas because I know I'm not blowing anybody away behind me. I'm not sending a big cloud of smoke into the atmosphere.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
So,
not really gas, right?
yeah. How
Yeah, it's
about
not
with
really a gas pedal.
right, exactly. It's not. It's a more of a throttle, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of social media and how that design affects behavior with regard to social media, what are your thoughts on some of the I know there can be addictive aspects to that, and things like that. What are your thoughts on that? I'm changing channels here just a little bit. I was just kind of curious as design affecting behavior as it relates to social media, because there's a lot with products with social media, Instagram and TikTok and Amazon, things like that. Not that Amazon social media per se, but there's the ratings and things like that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the Amazon ratings are interesting because they are a go-to source for confidence in a purchase. And I think we all do it. And one of the things I noticed, because I have asked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, because I give these talks, is that when you see an Amazon rating of, it's got a whole lot of 5-star reviews and it's got a couple of 1-star reviews, you read the 1-star review,
Mm-hmm.
right? Everyone goes to the 1-star reviews like, what am I missing? What did this person discover that no one else has discovered?
Right.
So that's an interesting bit of behavior, which means that one complaint on Amazon will get a lot of attention, like a disproportionate amount of attention, which also leads us to inclusive design. Maybe it's difficult for some people or some segment of the population, but it's also a good reason for companies to think inclusively. Let's make sure we design for everyone, because we don't want any 1-star reviews, because those 1-star reviews are powerful.
Mm.
So that's one way to think about how people behave, because they want that confidence in the purchase. So,
Right.
boy, another thought about behavior is, well, so many ways that people react or behave differently when they're doing something or purchase something. That would be good to know if you're inventing something that you would want to keep in mind.
Right. Yeah. What would be some examples off the top of your head with regard to that? Thinking about, okay, Amazon ratings and using that maybe as a tool for design.
Well, if you think about TikTok or scrolling on a phone, um, or Instagram, one of the issues and criticisms that people have, and one of the problems they have, is that they get paid for advertisements. And the more people see the ads, the more they get paid. And so it is in their best financial interest to keep people engaged or addicted to TikTok or Instagram or whatever that app is. But that can have obviously super negative effects. Also, the
Right.
algorithms can have super negative effects. So it is an issue that is deeply embedded into their financial model. Not to be not negative, uh, but it certainly supports some negative aspects of using those apps. People can get hooked, they can get depressed, they can really go off the deep end with thinking the whole world is in a better situation than they are, because they're seeing all these positive things, or they're seeing negative things and getting themselves depressed. So it is quite an issue. We took on Instagram. I was coaching one of the branding classes groups. The thesis project was on Instagram, and super interesting how the financial aspects of how Instagram gets money, gets paid, is so closely tied to the addictive nature of that app.
Mm, that's interesting.
And
Yeah.
not that they're being negative. I want to say the people at Instagram don't care. They may care, but they're in this, I don't want to say a rut. They're in the situation where they have different concerns. They went after something and there was a whole backlash. The whole backfired a bit.
I'm seeing a lot of pushback with social media in general, but it's also from a commerce standpoint, it's such an amazing tool. I remember the first time one of my daughters came to me after watching a TikTok video and she wanted to buy whatever they were showing in the video. I was like, wait a minute, is that an ad? No, they're just using it and they're playing with it or whatever. It's like, okay, I can kind of see where this is going.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe it's not an ad.
Yeah, kind of planting things. And how about as it relates to, let's say, a remote control or something, having the power stick in terms of designing, let's say somebody has an idea for a new type of remote control and there's the undo button and there's a lot that goes into that. Like it's its own little universe in terms of power and what it can do.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that
That's funny. Like a television remote control can be a dangerous tool, a scary tool. Some people don't want to touch it because if they hit the wrong button, they have no way to get back.
Mhm.
So think about, for instance, if you're using a computer, you know you've got that undo button.
Mhm.
You can do something and do something and do something and do something without fear of screwing something up because you can undo, like 20 steps back, you can undo.
Yeah.
You can't necessarily do that with a TV remote control. You press the wrong button, like the source or the input button, even if you press it by mistake.
Mhm.
So, designed a while ago, was involved in designing a controller for Hewlett Packard that where we added an undo button,
Mm.
like back up, back up, back up, back up, because it's very interesting when you start talking to people who have 3 remote controls in front of their TV and you don't know which one to pick up. Just
Right.
pressing the wrong button can get you into Never Never Land in terms of trying to get back to watch that show that you wanted to watch. And of course, if you have kids and they're natural button presses from the age of 1.5, you can also get into Never Never Land. And what you want to do is back out. I've spoken to, in doing our research, in-home research, I've spoken to people who never want to touch the remote control
Mm.
because the person in the house who knows how to use the remote control isn't home. So I I don't want to touch it. I'm going to never watch
Right.
TV, until they come back. They may be gone for a couple of days.
Yeah.
So very interesting. The undo button, it gives us so much confidence when we're using a computer. I mean, you don't really think about it, but there are things you would not do if you did not have the undo button in the computer. Now, what we need is an undo button in life. I need my whole life to have an undo button. I should not have done that yesterday. Undo,
Right.
undo. And it's, for the same reason I encourage people, the program that I'm teaching SVA, we have a giant blackboard. And literally, this blackboard is like, 9 feet tall and 40 feet wide. It's huge. The whole side of the room is one
Yeah.
giant blackboard. And I have them use the blackboard because when you use a blackboard, and a whiteboard would be the same thing. Unlike paper, when you write something on a blackboard, you can erase it immediately. You can undo. And they end up a little concerned because they haven't used the blackboard in a long time. But
Mhm.
they end up doing these amazing visualizations, mind maps of entire projects. I have them, for instance, plan an entire project start to finish. If you were going to create a new product, if you were going to invent something, or if you were going to create a startup, what are the amazing amount of steps that you'd have to tackle from start to finish? You'd
Right.
have to design, model, prototype. You got to start thinking about the name, the ad, who you talk to, what experts you bring in. Do you need consultants? Do you need engineers? Do you need this? On and on. When you start to sell it, do you need advertisements? Do you need a website? Start to finish, it's not that hard to fill up that 40-foot wide blackboard. And the reason I do that is because a lot of consultants in design, a lot of them want to get into strategy as a profession. They want to be a strategist within a corporation. And I say, if you want to be a strategist, you got to think about the whole thing. It's not about the idea. The idea is important, but it's the start. What you've got to do is think about the whole spectrum of things that have to be tackled in order to get this product off the ground.
Mm. That's such a good point. There's something about, especially, I don't know how many people still use pencils and paper, but pen and paper, if you make a mistake, you're crossing it out and then it stays there forever versus a
Yeah.
whiteboard or a blackboard that you can erase. And it's like the undo button, right? It's a little more freeing, I think.
Yeah. And because of that, what you do is you hesitate to put something on paper. You want to before you start committing it to pen on paper, you
Yeah.
kind of double check yourself and you kind of, oh, maybe I should put that here. I don't know. So you kind of hesitate because there's no undo
Right.
with pen and paper.
It's less free flowing and natural, right? You're already
Yeah.
editing what you're going to do before you even do it.
Yeah. In the same way, very similar way, I work with a lot of design groups and a lot of designers, when they're creating a physical product, they will model that product in foam. So they'll go into the shop or the model making area and they will use a block of foam and they would start to carve away a shape. Let's say they're designing a handle, for instance. They'll start to carve the foam. And one of the issues you have with carving away a block of foam is that if you go too far, you can't undo. You can't come back unless
Mm.
you start filling it with some messy stuff. So I encourage them to use clay, because if you use clay, which has been used for decades, right? Use clay to model it. You can add and you can take away. And if you take away too much, you can add back. And it's kind of a very flexible, much more organic in terms of shape creation.
Mm.
But I got to say, people don't like working in clay. As a result, these handles always end up a little bit bigger than they should be, because you're a little bit hesitant to make them the right size, because if you go too far, you got to come back. So I just
Oh,
noticed a tendency for things to be, foam models to be a little bit bigger, because of that same hesitancy that you would get with putting pen on paper. Don't want to go too far, because, there's no going back, or going back is just going to take some time.
yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's
And we don't want to start over.
right. Yeah, exactly. I can see how that really does affect the way a handle or grip or something turns out at the end, as if they're starting it in that way versus something like clay or another material that's a little more pliable. It's easy to add or take away or subtract or smush it into a ball and start over. Like it's quick and easy. I like working with clay. I think it's something that it brings me back to the Play-Doh days as a kid. And it's funny, even coaching students, I'll see where they started with some Play-Doh that their kids had, and they're like, okay, this is kind of the shape I'm thinking of, and they'll take a picture of it. But it's kind of I'm gonna work. I'll work to try to bring that back, creating better
Yeah.
products.
Yeah. If you notice a difference, if you have two projects, someone's working in foam, someone else is working in clay, you kind of notice a difference. The clay becomes a lot more organic.
It's interesting that a lot of companies immediately go to foam, for example, instead of thinking about other materials. But it's nice that you can go in and work with their team, and you're probably blowing their mind with some of the things that you're doing. Do you have a giant mobile blackboard that you wheel in to companies to go through that, or do you ask them to set something like that up?
No, most companies have blackboards, but I've got a collection of design groups, internal design groups, and design consultants, agencies, who show how innovative they are, and they're all putting Post-it notes
Mm.
on the wall. And it's all these squares, little ideas in squares. And that is so different than mind mapping an entire blackboard. So I, very early on, going back 10 years, I banned the Post-it notes in this class I'm teaching, because we have this blackboard. Unless you're writing a grocery list, no Post-it notes, because I think it's just little ideas. It's not the master plan. It's not the big ideas, like these little instant thoughts that I don't think are as productive as these mind maps that they are
Mhm.
creating. And it's met with a little bit of fear. When I say no Post-it notes, it's like, what do you mean? How are we going to innovate? How are we going to think if we don't have Post-it notes? And I point out that the guys who invented Post-it notes didn't have Post-it notes to do it.
It's a good point. Three never had Post-it notes to figure out how to invent Post-it notes, right?
That's right. They didn't do it that way. So, it's met with a little bit of, what do you mean, no Post-it notes? But the maps that they create is like a revelation, and graphically they're beautiful. They're massive and they're beautiful. And the other thing that's great about it, and this is also has to do with the way we present information, which is typically in a PowerPoint or keynote presentation, is that if you present a project on a massive blackboard, it's very dynamic. And the person watching can look back, and the person watching can see what's going ahead. And it's not slide by slide by slide by slide. We're talking about the entire picture. So I also have done this myself, but I also do this in this class I'm teaching, is have them make their final presentations on the massive blackboard.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can kind of do that with Figma or Miro, but we also compare the two methods, Figma and Miro is still kind of the Post-it note approach, little ideas or little blocks of information, where the
Right.
blackboard is just a rat's nest, 40-foot rat's nest of this master plan. And it does show you what you're up against and show you ideas. And you realize that before you do this, you have to do this. But before you do that, you have to do that. And after you do that, you have to do this. And these things
Mm-hmm.
come together here. And They're actually graphically beautiful.
You sent me that picture in preparation for this interview. I appreciated that. I was looking at that. My mind was blown. It was a work of art. And I'm sure the students had a lot more fun, different colored chalk. And you can create whatever bubble you want for something. It can be as big as you want, where a Post-it note's like a fixed size. So you're limited
Yeah.
by the size of it. Where, okay,
And
I want.
it's also a group activity. Imagine someone's writing on the board doing it, but the others in the group are critiquing, or you get two people at the same time, or three people, or whatever. The whole team can be up there with the chalk, or at least they're sitting back and watching this plan grow, as opposed to Post-it notes where people are just writing
Mhm.
to themselves and ta-da, here's the note. And
Right.
you can't read the Post-it note from your seat. You can't read the
Right.
Post-it note from where you're sitting.
Yeah, yeah, that's what was really interesting about the picture that you had. I think this would be a great exercise for anybody inventing a product or thinking about building a brand or creating strategies for things, is to have something like that where you can design it in a way that it has the shape that you want and the flow that flows with your natural expression. If you're a very linear person, okay, you can make boxes. If you're more free flowing, you can make circled bubbles and things like that, or a combination of both. Really, I think lends itself better to the human expression, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's not a strategy unless you figure out how to do it, not just what you need to do, but how you're going to do it and who does what. And that master plan is really the gist of the strategy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I wish people spent more time in front of a whiteboard or a chalkboard as they're planning things and um, you know creating. And it's kind of, I think, of going back to being a kid and just having that uninhibited creative flow coming out, where you're getting your hands dirty in the clay and you're using the crayons or the markers and chalkboard, and just allowing yourself the opportunity to just get it all out. Then you can start analyzing and moving things around and picking things apart and kind of going through the ideation process. So fascinating. I feel like we could talk for another 6 hours on these topics, as well as a lot more. And I know we're just scratching the surface in terms of your background and expertise. Be great to have you back on. To kind of wrap it up here a little bit, are there any other thoughts you might have for, let's say, the average inventor looking to just create a better product in general?
Yeah, I would say think three-dimensionally if it's a three-dimensional product, unless it's a service, of course. But even with a service, if you're doing some sort of interface, start mocking it up. But with a physical product, start mocking up as early as possible. Don't rely on really cool computer renderings, which look like a real product, but they're not going to tell you anything about usability until you start actually creating something. Work with cardboard and tape and paper and whatever it is to make that prototype or that mock-up as quickly as possible, because you don't want that thing to be precious. You want to not invest so much time that you don't want to change it. I find that if you spend 1 week creating a prototype, it's going to take another week for you to undo it because you don't want to, because you spent a week on it. So what you want to do is go as fast as possible, be as flexible as possible, and think about change, modify things as quickly as possible, and record what you're doing, show it to people, have other people use it, not just you, have a wide range of people use it, and go in lots of little steps. Don't say, I'm going to design something for 6 weeks. Then I'm
Mhm.
going to show it to people. Now, you may
Mhm.
have just wasted 6 weeks. So, after the first week, start calling people in or showing it to people or bouncing ideas off other people. Don't wait to do that, because it happens a lot.
Yeah.
It happens a lot. Be in touch with reality, like real people, as early as possible.
I hear this a lot where they show it to their family and their friends, and I was like, oh, they want to make you feel good. How do you find
Mhm.
people that aren't afraid to hurt your feelings and be brutally honest?
Yeah, it's okay if they're honest, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're just being nice.
Okay.
I find that talking to people more than once opens them up. So if you're going to show your prototype or your product to a couple of people in week 1 or week 2, then bring those same people back in week 3 or 4, because they'll start to get into what you're doing. and think of them as a member of the team, like advisors, not as test subjects. Think of them as, can you advise me on what to do, and kind of get them into the idea of, it's not quite co-creation, but it is inviting them into your world of, you need to design this. What would you advise, or what's working for you, or what's not working for you? And I think the second or third time around with the same people, they kind of loosen up a bit. So they may not be as nice. They'll start to see what you're doing, or they'll start to get more ideas. The other issue you have is that not everyone's going to have, being exposed to a product or a prototype for the first 45 minutes. They're not necessarily going to have instant responses or instant thoughts about it. But the second or third time, they may start to loosen up, or things incubate in the time you first showed them and the time that they are now seeing it again. So
Yeah.
stay in contact with real world reality. At the same time, keeping in mind that you don't want to look out the back window. You don't want to get people's old thoughts.
Mm,
I give the example of BlackBerry, the phone that had a lot of buttons,
yeah.
and the demise of Apple when they came out with the smartphone because it has no buttons. And BlackBerry did their homework, and they found that phones need buttons. And where's BlackBerry now? Who knows?
Right.
But you don't see a whole lot of BlackBerry phones out there with a whole lot of buttons. So
You
um,
do.
they use these interviews or these user sessions wisely.
I like the idea of coming back to the same people and just saying, hey, I know it's been a couple weeks. I made a couple little tweaks. Tell me what you think about it. And giving them permission to be completely honest. Because if you're sugarcoating anything, it doesn't help you or doesn't help them. And I think for people that maybe the first go around, they said, hey, oh, that looks really cool. Yeah, I love this or I love that. When you show it to again with maybe a little more of a critical tone, like, okay, I appreciate that, but really tell me what you think of this now. I could see where they would feel a little bit more open about being, yeah, I could see where you really need, this is too long, or you need to tweak this part, or I really don't like the thickness of that grip, or, whatever it is. To just kind of come back and do that with a wide range of people. Early on,
Yeah.
it was always family and friends, but like to find other people that are willing to, maybe you don't even know them.
Don't average those people. Get
Yeah.
into the mindset that you want to design and you want to accommodate and attract each and every one of them. So
Right.
even if you find someone who you may think is a corner case, don't treat them as a corner case. It's funny because when it work with marketing groups, let's say we talk with 20 people and somebody says something critical, they may say, oh, that was just one person out of 20.
Mhm.
But I may say, aha, this person discovered something. Let's act on it. So different mindset on how you accommodate a spectrum of people rather than trying to homogenize them.
I think groupthink can kind of, if it is, let's say, a room full of people, groupthink can kind of come into the picture too, where it's like, oh, well, if everybody hates it and I say I love it, or if everybody loves it and I say something critical, they're more thinking about themselves and trying to kind of fit in sort of, into the group.
Yeah. And one other thing is one person at a time, one-on-one interviews, not like a focus group, but not a group of people sitting at a table. It's one-on-one, because then you get like reality. The only time I change that is when you get two people who know each other, like
Right.
girlfriend, boyfriend, a husband and wife, because they will start criticizing each other.
Mm,
They'll say, "Oh, well, I use it this way." And they'll say, "No, you don't." And that banter that they have between each other is a lot more revealing than any question that you may ask them.
yeah.
So sometimes they go at it and you kind of learn from their internal discussions.
Right. Yeah. That's such a great point. I like the idea of smaller groups or individuals instead of like a big group of people. And maybe that's a whole nother topic for another podcast down the road. Yeah. Well, Dan, I appreciate your time and thanks for coming on. Any final thoughts for the Inventor's Edge listeners?
Yeah, maybe don't fall in love with your first idea. Be wide open and don't invest so much time in the first idea that you don't have a way to back out of it. But your first idea may be great, just don't fall in love with it too much that you are inflexible or resistant to change. And the other thing is, plan on being uncomfortable. If you want to be innovative, make sure you're okay at being uncomfortable. Now, this has to do a lot more with larger corporations or groups because a lot of individual inventors are fine with it. But in a larger group, you may want to rock the boat, and there is discomfort in doing that.
That's great advice. Really, really appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time and your insights and contributions to the episode. I'm really excited to have you on. This is always, for me, the product design is such a fascinating topic, and I like doing deep dives into it. So I'd love to have you back on, and I'm confident our listeners will have some really tangible takeaways they can grab onto and use and approach to their, as they're designing their products. Yeah. How can people get in touch with you if, let's say, they want to work with you to have you coach them, or what's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, email is easy. So my email address is dan@ThinkActHuman. That's one word, no space or anything. So those 3 words, dan@ThinkActHuman. And then on, Instagram and LinkedIn, it's just my name, Dan Formosa. So I'm accessible there. If anyone wants to talk, or just ping me on LinkedIn or email, and yeah, no problem. I'm pretty approachable.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, I appreciate that. And on the YouTube channel, we'll have the links down below. And so for all listeners, please check out Dan's website to learn more about his incredible work and his incredible background. And be sure to share your thoughts, your comments, any questions about the episode, and connect with us on social media. And if you're watching on YouTube, smash the like button and be sure to subscribe. Dan, I appreciate you being here. I'm really excited to have you back on the show in a future episode.
Yep. Great.
Would love to do that. So thanks again, Dr. Dan Formosa, for joining us today. And please check out ThinkActHuman. Email Dan to connect. And remember, invent with purpose, innovate with passion, and bring your ideas to life. Until next time, keep inventing, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Inventor's Edge podcast. I'm your host, Scott Putnam, and if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a review, and please share it with fellow inventors. Your next breakthrough could be just around the corner. For more tools, tips, and resources, visit us at inventors-edge.com. Until next time, invent with purpose, innovate with passion, and bring your ideas to life.